How do we care for ourselves when we also have to care for others? Today, we're talking about coping with trauma when you're not okay, and it's still your job to take care of and comfort other people. I called in Dr. Kima to help with this one, so stick around. Hey, Dr. Kima, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just used to saying I'm good. And I think that I'm getting better each day. But generally, there's definitely still an air, there's something in the air that is not good. But we have been, I've been conditioned to, even in better times, you're just conditioned to say, yeah, I'm good, everything's fine.
Yes, I think we all are. And it takes a second to take a beat to say, wait, no, I am not. I'm not okay.
Right.
Things are rough.
And how are you? Before we jump in, I think about you as a Black female psychologist, right? When we think about essential workers right now, you're like the epitome of essential workers. And I can imagine that people are coming to you from all angles, right? From work, from home, from play. How are you doing? How are you holding up?
So, for hello, everyone. As Candace said, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. So, as COVID has happened, I still have to work. I still have to see my clients. And on top of all that is happening in the world right now, there's also a lot of feelings that come up. And as a psychologist, my job is to put my feelings in a cute box and put it over here so that I can do the work for others. But, there's a coalition of us, a group of us who know each other and support each other. And that has been really valuable because we're all struggling. It's hard. It's hard for me to take the rage and pain I feel and package it nicely to set aside and be like, okay, so tell me about your day to day for my clients. It's hard to sit in. So as part of my job as a clinical psychologist, I work in academia, meaning I work in an academic institution. And so that means for me that I oftentimes, besides seeing clients, I do teaching and supervision. And I also sit on different committees and boards. And it's hard to be in meetings and getting news alerts and things like that and hold it all in while I'm smiling and talking about something that might be wholly different. Or because of the committees I sit on our diversity committees, and sitting and talking about those things without, the rage overcoming me and saying, burn it all down, can be difficult. And so I've had to heavily rely on my network of supportive colleagues, as well as really step up my own self-care quite a bit.
That leads exactly into what our conversation is about, because we're talking, like, you are one of these people who are taking care of others, right? That's your job. In my line of work, I'm a childcare provider, and so I think about the fact I happen to be closed, but there are a lot of childcare centers, daycare centers, home centers that are still open. And I am remembering, the amount of sort of like effusive happiness that you present in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock or whatever time you open, for parents, for your clients as they drop off, and then for your kids, right? Because you want them to continue to have a normal day, right? Little tiny kids probably don't know exactly what's going on, but I think we also don't give them enough credit as they get to the toddler stage and the preschool age to be able to recognize when the adults around them are struggling. So I guess let's just jump right into it. You started to allude a little bit about self-care. What are some of the suggestions that you would give to someone to be able to manage themselves during this time when they might not be feeling good?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I want to say that I actually hate the term self care, and
Mm.
it's not because it's a bad term, but so much as it puts the onus on you. What am I doing? It's like another task to do. It's like, oh wait, yeah, I've got to slot myself in there too. So it almost has its own pressure just from having the word self in it. And so instead, I say things like how I'm coping or what I'm doing to prioritize me, things like that. But all in all, I first want to start with saying it's okay if whatever tools you have or have already used aren't working anymore. So the first thing I want to say is when those tools aren't working anymore, that's the time you might want to seek out someone like myself or other therapists to help guide you or provide additional tools. Everyone has coping skills. They just don't realize it because they don't call it that. It's not like
Mm,
people are walking around saying, here's my coping skill. Like I say that, but that's my
right.
job. So instead, what people are doing is the things that normally either bring you joy, are relaxing, things like that. And so as therapists, what our job is to say, whatever you're doing that works, keep doing it and
Mm,
we'll add. The things that you might be doing that could work but aren't as healthy or helpful long term will help you substitute them. So I usually, tell folks,
I
okay,
like
there's what'd you say?
like snacks.
It's like, okay, let's move that.
Right, right.
So people have a variety of ways of coping. So one of the things that is a particular strategy for me is knowing the things that turn my brain off. I am in a highly stressful, fast-paced position, and so at the end of the day, especially at the end of the day that was difficult for me or just had a lot of like emotional baggage with it, the first thing I want is utter silence and like for
Mm,
my brain to shut down. And so a lot of people have what we call like escape pleasures. So things that you just immerse yourself in and they completely transport you. So for me, that's always been reading or, sometimes I'll binge watch a show and knit something because I like to knit and crochet. So doing the things that bring me pleasure are my go-to kind of like, let me just decompress and jump into a fantasy world that has nothing to do with reality. And that's helpful.
right. Mhm.
And so most people think about coping skills as what are those, those kind of big things that you do that make you happy or relax you. But there's also some basic things that, and sorry about the ambient noise. I'm having work done on my house. so, those are the kind of big things that people think of. But when it comes to self-care, there's basic stuff that you have to do. Like, are you eating right? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you making sure you have enough nutrition? Are you exercising or moving your body? And so starting off with honestly just looking at your schedule and saying, where do I take time to just breathe in my day is
Mm,
the first step so that you can start to work stuff like that in. We have these big escape things we like to do, but it's the little stuff throughout the day that actually helps you dial down your stress level. So I take, 10-minute breaks every 1 to 2 hours. And sometimes it's just getting up and getting a cup of tea. And sometimes it's doing like quick fix 5 to 10 minute yoga
mm,
or doing quick calisthenics or something like that that just moves my body so that I'm moving stress out of the different muscle groups where it tends to gather. So my stress sits in my shoulders and my jaw because I clench my jaw. So doing things like that are really helpful just to kind of like pressure release throughout the day. Your body, think of it as a pressure cooker, and you need that valve to kind of like let the steam out. And
mm,
so having it baked into your schedule periodically is important. And for caregivers, it's especially important because your tank is what powers all the people you take care of. And if
mm.
you're not putting any gas into it, not only are you going to be empty, but the people around you who count on you will be as well. And
Real.
if your own self isn't a priority, the other people in your life I know are, and therefore you have to make sure you're topping up your tank.
Mm, that is so good. That idea of just releasing a little bit of pressure, because I think a lot of times as the person who people look to, right?
Mhm.
If you're a parent or if you're a caregiver, you could be a caregiver of adults. You could be a childcare provider. People are looking to you, and sometimes you have to catch yourself, right? You have to turn that frown into a smile like really fast because you realize you had just um, sort of gone into another space, right? Because there was just a
Right.
moment. You know what I mean? And you can sort of catch yourself in that moment. And usually you don't catch yourself. Usually it's the little one who goes, "Mom, what's wrong with your face?" Right? Like,
Right.
or Miss Candace, what's wrong with your face? What are you doing? So those things that like that image, I mean, we've all heard the idea or like the imagery of putting on your mask first, right? In a plane or whatever. And it's such a hard thing to fight because the thing we are told all the time is as a parent, you take care of other people first, right? You put their best
Right.
interest to make sure that you're taking care of others. So it goes against, it is very counterintuitive to what we've been told all the time.
Absolutely. And I think this may hit especially for Black women, you know, the idea of a strong Black woman and carrying all things, doing all things for our families, for our businesses. And we often get slated last. And, you know, something I think Jada Pinkett said either during an interview or during an episode of Red Table Talk when she was saying that she's had to learn that she can't come last
Mm,
because then she, you know, she not only is empty for her kids and her husband, but then there's resentment that comes in because you're
right.
like, all I wanted to do was sit down for 5 minutes, you know, like
Yeah.
your brain goes to not good places. And you brought up something important, you know, slipping that mask on. When folks have asked me, especially like, how do I talk to my kids about COVID who are 3 or 4 and don't understand why they can't hug grandma and grandpa? And now, for a lot of folks, how do I talk to my kids about racism and systemic injustice? My first thing is be honest. You're right. Kids know more than we give them credit for. They feel more than we give them credit for. And most importantly, kids are much more resilient than we give them credit for. When
Mhm.
you're honest with them, you give them autonomy. They have the control to say, okay, I know, or they know according to their developmental level what is going on. They've got some sort of conceptualization of it. And then by being honest with them, and I mean honest in your reactions, you show them it's okay to A, have those feelings, and then B, how to manage them by you being honest in your reaction and then coping and showing them that there are ways to help yourself move to the next moment. You're empowering them to do that as well, to be able to soothe themselves and also how to move forward to the next step. So being able to be honest in you is important. I, you know, again, developmentally. So I'm not saying like maybe have a sob fest and some wine with your, you know, 16-year-old. that may not be where we are. But it could be like, mommy's sad right now because
Right.
there's a lot going on in the world that makes mommy sad, and that's okay.
Hmm. That it's tough. It is really tough. There's no two ways about it. It's really tough. One of the things that I've learned about recently um, is something called like blood trauma and ancestral trauma, and it makes me think that a lot of times, or not a lot of times, it makes me think that nothing has happened to me directly, right? Nothing in the last 2 weeks has happened to me directly, but I still feel this sense, like this great, profound sense of loss and of fear, um, and of rage, all of those things. And so, my question for you is how do you help people understand that with
Sure.
themselves, that like it's okay for you to be upset about this, and it's not being dramatic. It's like we don't have to trivialize it. These are real things, and they come from a place, right? So even though you don't feel it right now, it comes from a place. It's like in our DNA, right? Like this trauma is included in
Absolutely.
our DNA. Can you explain a little bit as a
Sure.
because I'm just,
So,
it's anecdotal with me.
no, it's understandable. So a lot of folks have been asking lately about that, and so it's it's a new area that we have been trying to understand, and so it has a few names, but the by and large we call it historical or intergenerational trauma.
Mm,
And so what that means is that you belong to a group in a particular society that has had compound traumas throughout the history of that country. And your knowledge of those compound traumas means that you don't go into a new trauma as if this is a brand new thing. It's another layer on top of the other layers that your people have already had to deal with. So what I mean by that is, think about it. If you get stung by a bee, it hurts, you're like, darn, okay. But as a human being who has an intellectual capacity, that bees sting in general. And so you try to avoid bees because you don't want to get stung. And so if you get stung, you're like, damn it, bees. And it's one more thing adding to your information on bees, right? So that means that you might be fearful of bees, or you might avoid them, or whatever the case may be. That's what historical trauma is. We learn as human beings, as sentient beings, through our experiences. But those experiences aren't just personal and individual, they are cultural and community oriented as well. So I know what a fireman does, not just because I have called a fireman to my house, but because I have seen firemen interact with people in my community. So when we see these things on the news or on social media, they aren't brand new pinpoint occurrences. They add to a collection of historical oppression that's always going to hurt. When we see movies, I was watching someone give an interview where he talked about, the summer of 2014, 2015, he was in a bad place. That was when, it was after Trayvon, but it was the summer of Michael Brown. And it was the summer of Alton Sterling, and feeling that, and then going to see 12 Years a Slave. And, for everyone who hasn't seen it, there are some really tough scenes in that movie. And as Black people, knowing that this is not a story, it's not a fiction. This happened. And not only did this happen to this man, this is what happened to our people. And so you see those representations, and then you see the representations of the Jim Crow South, and you see the representations of the civil rights movement, and you see the representations of the war on drugs, and then you see the representations of state-sanctioned violence against Black bodies. It is one laceration to your soul after another. That's why it feels so bad when you see just one, because it's not just one. It's sitting on a mound of scar tissue that goes so deep into your core, you can't even find the original cut.
Gosh, Lord have mercy. And then sometimes I think, you wonder if ignorance is bliss, but you literally can't even be ignorant about this stuff. Like you could not know one story, but you have a different story that I had an experience this week where someone posted something about a young man who was murdered, and I realized that I had forgotten about it. Like it felt like it was one of the many, and my brain just hid it away, and I literally did not remember until I saw that. But then it opened a door and it flooded, like every single detail, every single thing came right back to the surface, and I couldn't even push it down again, right? Like it just it was overwhelming, like it was happening all over again. And again, it's not something that happened to me. It's something that I remember being like shown on social media over and over and over again. Even if you get to forget it, you haven't quite forgotten it.
Right. Your mind does a great many things to get you to move throughout the day. And sometimes that's putting something away, and sometimes it's saying, no, this is an experience we've had, or if we haven't, someone has. So act accordingly. That's your brain's job. I tell people that when people are like, I wish we didn't have so many labels and categorizations, I think that's what divides the world. That's asinine. That's what your brain does. That's your brain's job. It's to understand a particular thing, categorize it so that you know how to act on it. We can't have a world without labels and categories because our brains don't work like that. If they evolve to do so, awesome sauce. At
Right.
present, no. So knowing that, you know, something has happened, your brain needs it so it can catalog it and say, okay, in that situation, now I know what to expect, so I know how to act. And so that means that there are things you can't get away from. You know, you and I both know that when I get stopped in a car, my brain doesn't say, this is a brand new person. I don't know what they're going to do. So let me just sit here and be hunky dory. Of course it doesn't. I put my phone like on the clip on the dash. I've got like, you know, the recording ready to hit. My hands are in the 10 and 2 o'clock position. My like insurance and license are on my lap so he could see it. Like these are the things we do because it's not just, oh, I want to be ready for a police officer so I can make this, you know, quickly go away. It's, I want to survive. I want to get home to my family. I want to make sure that nothing happens to me. I do not want to be a hashtag. So let me do all these things that I hope will help, because we've even shown that even doing all those things does not necessarily mean that you're getting home to your babies or you're getting home to your family. So your brain has to do that. It does a lot to maybe sometimes put it away so that you can go out through your day, but it comes roaring back when you're either reminded of it or, you know, you need it so that you can know what to do.
That's so real. It's so real. So if we could speak a little, I mean, I think that again, these terms are these things that we're talking about. It's important for everyone, and it's important for caregivers of all kinds, right? Childcare, adult care, parents, that sort of thing. But if we can talk specifically about Black childcare providers, right?
Sure.
Typically are women, right? Typically are women. A lot of like, I've only just gotten into it for a few years. Typically are older women, right? Are older women who have life experiences. I'm thinking a lot about them, and where I live, there is very clearly one group of people who give the service and another group of people who use the service, right? And so you are typically, again, not always, and I hate that I have to make that clarification, but not always, but I'm thinking about Black female caregivers with you know, a host of white clients right now, and white clients who are I'm going to go out on a limb and say white clients who recognize that this is a crap time, right? The white clients that recognize that the people around that Black people are sort of mentally struggling right now, emotionally, not mentally, emotionally struggling right now. Two questions there. How would you suggest people manage that? You know, maybe a white client who's trying to figure out how to not say the wrong thing, and maybe a Black provider who's trying not to, you know, carry the burden of making other people feel okay in that way, right?
Excellent. Yeah, excellent question. So when it comes to, when it comes to a business provider, I want to be cognizant of the idea that people may not have the privilege I have of being able to speak their truth and be as honest as I am at my job. So that's part of my job, is to be honest and to call out these things where I see them sitting on the committees I sit on, but you know, still within the within the proper, you know, framework of how we do that. So you know, my inclination is to always say be honest. Tell people that you have a limit. You know, we were talking about letting your, you know, having that mask for your kids and the people that you care for, and taking that mask off so that they can see that no, sometimes I'm not okay. I think showing your clients that being honest like that is important, but I also know that maybe everyone doesn't have that luxury. And so if you don't have the luxury to say, yes, it's a crap time, and here's what I can do, but I can't do some of this extra stuff, so back up off me. If that's not an option to you, or being frank about the reason why isn't an option to you, to still be able to say, you know, we have some boundaries, or be able to set some boundaries, set some limits for yourself and for your clients. I say that because I don't have the capacity sometimes to do some of the extra things that people ask me to do. So like, hey, can I consult you about X, Y, and Z? Or hey, can I get your ear for this? Or could you look over this written statement for me? There are days when I'm like, sure, I'd love to pitch in. And there are other days where I'm like, no, full stop, no. And so having to have those moments where I say no is imperative, so that, again, I'm filling my tank, I'm putting my oxygen mask on first. And so if you have clients who maybe are reaching out or saying, you know, gosh, I'm just seeing so much. I'm so sorry. What can I do? Just say, I think sometimes just saying, if I need something, I will let you know, is a good enough response. And again, I'm sorry for the construction in my house. But sometimes that's a good enough response to just say, I heard you, I received your message. I will come back to you if I want to. Is important. I think a lot of us are getting like emails from friends or text messages or from people that we know but don't know, or, you know, are associates with, and they're like, how can I help? What can I do? And so that leads into the second part of the question you asked, as a white ally, what do I do? The first part of allyship is being quiet and listening. Listen to Black voices. There are resources out there on kind of like how you can do this step by step. And so one of the first things to do is listen. And so a lot of folks are reaching out, and I love the inclination to do so. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Wondering if I shut my window if it helps the cause. Okay.
Real life.
Right, real life. This is where we are. This is COVID. I can't control these things. So yeah, you know, sometimes being able to be an ally, you're fired up. You're like, what can I do? What's the first thing that I can do? Well, first, don't ask Black people. That's first. And by that, I don't mean don't ask Black people as a whole. I mean, don't ask your Black friend, because you're, again, putting another to do on their list. You're putting another task on there. You're asking them to carry the emotional weight and doing the educational lifting for you, which is intellectually lazy. There are resources out there with, again, step-by-step guides on like how to begin this work, how to do this work, where to go, what to look for, what to read. There's tons of information. You don't have to reach out to the one Black kid you knew in middle school. Like, that is not helpful. That's not a good thing to do. So, you know, and people asking, how are you, isn't particularly helpful. And I want you guys to think about this in a grief way. When you know someone close to you has had a loss in their family, you know, saying how are you is a bit of an empty question, because you know the answer is crap. They aren't doing well. They're not doing okay. Your Black friends and family, we're not okay. We're not having a good time right now. That's the answer. So the question doesn't need to be asked.
We've told you. Now you know.
Right? You already know. So what I have found more helpful is helping people either do something or stating that you have done something is a more helpful thing to do. So I've had coworkers who say, it's a crap time right now. There's a whole lot going on. Is there something I can take off your plate so that you have the space to have those 10-minute breaks, or to decompress, or, you know, something like that. You know, I just finished writing a book chapter on social justice and mental health. And writing that book chapter was great because I felt like I was contributing to the cause, but it was hard as hell because I had to write about, you know, the implicit bias in the healthcare system, and all these things that aren't particularly beneficial for our people. So having my coworkers say, what can I take off your plate, knowing that you're doing this work so that you can do it and then have like space to decompress your brain. So saying, what can I do to take off your plate right now, or what can I take off for you? For people who aren't necessarily your coworkers, so you have no influence on their workload, I've had people say, I sent you a Starbucks gift card so that you can take some time to just have a coffee and like.
My friend brought me a cake yesterday. To be fair, it's my birthday, but still, I like almost cried. Like a whole cake.
Right. It's lovely. Someone sent me an Amazon gift card. It was like, go read a book.
Oh.
Go do something good for yourself. And so it doesn't have to be monetary. I've had other people saying, I donated to the Bail Project. So I know for your birthday, that you had a fundraiser set up. So,
yeah.
yes.
It's been amazing.
Yeah. So having people do that and say, I donated in your name. And so I also want you to know, if there's something I can do, I'm here and I'm ready. So being able to say like that, or say, I'm here for you, I see you, and I love you, and I'm doing this work. If you need something, let me know, but no response is necessary, is really helpful, because just responding to you to say, thank you, that's so lovely, is a burden. I hate that it is, but it is.
And especially if you're getting like 10 of them, right?
Right.
Or if you are the one getting all those calls from middle school, from those people, like, it's a lot of calls. I promise you. I mean, thank you, but it's a lot of calls.
It's a lot of calls. It's a lot of emails. It's a lot of text messages. And so, having to respond every 8 seconds and be like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, is not helpful. So doing something, A, helps you as an ally because you feel active, and B, helps the person that you actually want to help, as opposed to asking an open-ended question we all know the answer to.
Yeah, that's so true. And then this as my last question, which is more of like a comment, and would love to hear your commentary on it. I have seen a lot of people ask the question of how to talk to their kids about racism. And while we've already said there are a ton of lists and instructionals and those kinds of things, especially from the perspective of a white family or a non-Black family talking to their kids about racism, I think what's more important is to show your kids how to be non-racist, right? Like, we can't just go out and buy, like you said, it's not all monetary. We can't just go out and buy 15 different books and put them on the table and say, okay, now my kids can be racist, or I gave to the Bail Project because Candace told me to, so now we're all set, right? Like,
done.
What is absolutely exponentially more helpful in the long run is like, who are your friends? Like, who are your actual friends, not the friends you call when there's a national crisis, but who are your actual friends? Who are the actual kids that your kids see that don't look like them? Are those the kids you invite over for play dates? Like, are those the people you invite over to special occasions at your house? Even though we can't do that anymore, but you have to live an anti-racist life. You can't just talk about an anti-racist life. The same way as a parent, your kid, like my kid says things all the time that I want to tell them, don't say that, you shouldn't say that. But he says it exactly the way I say it. Right. So like, he's going to learn more from me not swearing than from me telling him that it's a bad word. Right.
Right.
So,
you hit the nail on the head. I think for a lot of people who are allies and want to be co-conspirators, and for those who don't know, let me define that. So allyship is about it's about the verbal representation. It's about language. It's about being able to say, here is what an ally is. I support you. Let me amplify Black voices or Latinx voices, LGBTQIA voices, etc. A co-conspirator is putting yourself out. It's the work It's doing the work. It's putting your body between mine and a police officer's. It is making sure that when something's about to go down, you're right next to me. Like,
Mhm.
that's a co-conspirator. You are there for the work. And so when a lot of people are coming to allyship and want to be co-conspirators and do anti-racist work, I think that there can be not an expectation, but well, a bit of an expectation in this day and age that you're going to find an answer to this problem and then implement that solution and it's going to be done. And that is not what we're here for.
Mm.
That's not a thing.
Mhm.
Black people have been doing this work for 400 plus years and we ain't done yet. So you're
Mhm.
going to have to get real comfortable with this not being a 5-minute solution.
Mhm.
It isn't going to be about reading a few books. It's not just going to be about watching 13th on Netflix, although it's a wonderful documentary. It's not going to be about watching, the Hate You Give or Just Mercy. Those are all great things, but you're right. Who is in your child's life? Who personifies and humanizes those representations that are in the books and the movies and the TV shows you're showing them? Being anti-racist is the same as, being wanting them to learn, you know, a second language or wanting them to be good at math or anything like that. It's constant learning. It is
Mm.
learning by, maybe books or, a TV show or something, and then it's reinforced every day, all the time.
Mhm.
And you also have to be
Forward,
honest that there's
backwards, upside down, inside
right
out,
all
all
the
the
time,
different ways.
exactly. And you also have to be honest that you are going to make mistakes and therefore they might make some mistakes and then
Mhm.
that is okay. And so being able to talk to your kiddos, particularly for non-black allies and co-conspirators, talking to your children about racism needs to be a more honest conversation. The reason so many individuals in this country are finding it hard to wrestle with Black Lives Matter and want to say all lives matter, et cetera, is because this country prioritizes and really lionizes patriotism. To be a patriot is the utmost honor that you could have as an American citizen. And patriotism means loving this country and loving the values it was founded on. And the values it was founded on is equality and freedom and democracy and justice for all. And that is a lie. It
Mm.
is a giant con. And having to accept that is so antithetical to our generational citizenry that people will violently reject it because we want to be American patriots. That's what being an American patriot is. It's admitting that we have some flaws, but that the basic tenets of this country, the
I'm good.
founding blocks, are good. And
Mhm.
it's not.
They're
It's utter
not.
shit.
Right.
It's not at all.
It's not.
It's not that the ideals weren't good, it's that the ideals were set forth on my back. They
Mm.
were written with my people's blood on top of their skin. Like, that is the America that we are talking about. That's the reality. Is that when they said equality and truth and justice for all, they were not talking about me and you. They were
Right.
not talking about Indigenous and First Nations individuals. They were not talking about Asian Americans. They weren't talking about the diverse America we have now. They were talking about cishet white men.
Mm.
That's it.
Mhm.
That's who they included in equality and freedom and democracy. Not me, not you.
Mm.
And so when you want to do anti-racism work, you have to start there. That the country was built on systemic oppression. The country was built on racism. Racism is, not something that came about because we happened to have a disagreement. The country was built on white supremacy. Race and racism are the children of white supremacy. Race didn't start first,
Mm.
white supremacy did.
Mhm.
And so talking to your children about that so that they don't have to unpackage the con as a 45-year-old individual who's lived this life, whose parents have told them these stories, whose grandparents have told them these stories about what it means to be an American, is more important than I think anything else,
Mhm.
because that's what we have to come to a reckoning about, is that this country was built on our oppression.
Mm-hmm.
That was the founding block of this country. It was built on the displacement and genocide of a whole other people, our indigenous and First Nations brothers and sisters. So if we start there, that is what helps your kids see a more realistic version of what
Mm-hmm.
America is. And it makes it easier to be anti-racist when you understand the lie.
Right. Right. When it's not the first time that you're hearing about Black Wall Street, or the
Right.
first time that you're hearing about the
Rosewood
right.
or
I can't, is Rosewood in Baltimore, or is that a different one?
that's
There's so much, right? See, there's like so
right.
many of them. Um, the last thing I wanted to add on there, because it always feels like you have to, is of course we're not saying to talk to your 3-year-old about lynching. Like, that's not what we're saying. There's a whole list, right? There's a playbook that has been
Yeah.
created to help us all, and specifically white allies and people who are looking to be co-conspirators, to start developmentally appropriately with
Right.
their children to get this information across. But I think the thing that I want to, you know, I was worried that we went off topic, but I am reminded that you can't talk about one thing without talking about the other, right? Um, we can't just talk about grief and not talk about racial oppression and injustice, right? And we
Right.
can't just talk about racial oppression and act like it's not political. And we can't be apolitical, because if you are claiming apoliticalness, you're actually choosing the side of the people in charge, right? Who the side
Right.
of the oppressor at this point. So it's really important that we call a thing and use the appropriate words. And I think the thing I'm taking away from this mostly is that there is space for all of us. There's space for those of us, Black and brown people, Black people today, to grieve and to try to heal. Right there's space for that, and I think that more than ever now we are claiming that space. I think more than
Yes.
ever we are. Even though we feel disempowered and disenfranchised out in the real world, in the space that is ours, right? You're not going to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to say what I need to say at whatever level I can, right? Without messing
Right.
up the money. We say, don't mess up the money. But we're trying to take the power, whatever kind of power and autonomy that we have, to say that we are going to manage our grief and our trauma however we can. There's also space for white people to be allies, to ask questions
Yeah.
at the appropriate time in the appropriate way. There is also space for you to make a mistake if you recognize the mistake, right? If we can sort of talk through that, or you recognize that you might, like, I feel like one of the things we have to get comfortable with is you might make a mistake that costs you a friendship, right? But then
Yeah.
maybe the lesson in that is that you don't do that to the next friendship, right?
Right.
And that's a pretty tough thing for me to even say out loud, and I think it's really tough for people to hear. But I don't think that we win or we gain anything by being afraid to speak our truth at the fear of losing someone, because then that means it wasn't really a strong friendship or a strong thing to begin with. So
Right.
I think about that as disappointment. And I have only recently started to really understand why, like, I'm sure you know of some probably older generation Black people who are just not willing to deal with white people, right? They're just not willing to even try, because they've had so many experiences and they've had so much disappointment, right?
Right.
You think something is different, and then the disappointment in finding out that even with all the things that so and so has said, that the actions, right, or the
Right.
unintended, the unconscious actions, and failure to recognize, like, that pain, that is a pain that I didn't understand, right? And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, Uncle so and so, don't be like that, don't be like that, you know.
Right.
And you realize that that disappointment is heavy. So
It's heavy. Yeah.
even as heavy as it is, it's worth it, I think now, to make sure that you know who's around you, right? Who are the people
Right.
you are building your circle with on all the sides, right? I want you to have
Right.
strong friendships, whatever those friendships look like. And we all have to be able to come to those friendships as our full selves, not as the good black friend or the like woke white
Right.
friend, right? Like we don't
Right.
need any of those people.
No.
I don't think we need any of those people. I think we just need people who are able to be who they are, at the best that they can be. So, Dr. Kima, as we affectionately call you, thank you so much for taking the time. Again, I know that there are so many things that you have to do, so many people who are coming to you, and I'm so glad to have you on my team for almost 20 years now. So I love you so
Yes.
much, and I am so grateful for you on a Saturday to come and talk to people about this stuff, because I was like, some people were asking me things and I go, you know what? I know somebody who has some better answers, and I am doing a disservice trying to repeat and like I am doing a disservice trying to figure out what it is that she said, right? I'm doing a disservice right now trying to recap. So I'm so glad that you were here. I think even my friend Jaylene, she says this was so helpful. I know that the
Right.
playback of this will help so many people, and especially for me. Um, uh, I feel like I'm just going to put it everywhere, and I just expect all of my friends. This is a very short episode for the Breezy Moms podcast. I expect you all to watch this so that I don't have to give these answers again. So that is mine. That is my personal shout out. Thank you very much. We said what we said. And if you
Yes,
missed it, please tune in again.
there is a recording.
Yes, there's a recording. So again, Dr. Kima, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I always enjoy being able to come on and chat with you. So I'm hopeful this is helpful. And, if you get questions from folks or they want specific resources, let me know. And I'm happy to send you a list I've put together.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I will talk to you soon, probably like
All
tonight.
right. Probably tonight.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Jaylene, for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.